First up, which is a little different from the original published schedule, is OpenZFS channel programs, abilities and limitations. And from the calls, perhaps naively, can we have zpool operations? So anyone who looks into channel programs finds the canonical documentation. That's easy to find, and the slides are all linked from the main page. And there's the original presentations, I believe, at a developer summit. And you can read the canonical description there. And a great many users have never heard of them, nor have gone very deep into them. So I want to bring up some topics from the calls. So we can go around the room a little later on who's using them and how. And the manual has some examples, but maybe they don't align with what the people who just will hopefully have given their examples are doing. And like anything such as FIO, profiles of workloads, are there repos of channel programs? Hopefully we can identify those. And somewhat orthogonally, what are the performance implications of a whole bunch of coordinated operations? Is that a net benefit? Is that something to watch out for, like those user properties that people have abused and found surprises with when everything's an administrative transaction group? A key question, and if you really want to focus on it today, is what are the pragmatic opportunities and limitations of having zpool operations handled by channel programs? Because many of us would love to see a storage description language. We describe the desired state of a pool. We get there through whatever mechanism. Maybe channel programs are that mechanism, maybe not. And above all, what are we missing? So anyone in the room, any heavy users of channel programs? Who's done that dabble experiment with them? Yes, Alan, what have you done with channel programs to date? And what was the goal you were trying to achieve?
I think the first one I looked at was recursive rollback. So trying to roll back to a specific snapshot that existed on a data set and its children and roll them all back at once. I think the other thing to note is that a lot of people are probably using channel programs without knowing it.
Please elaborate.
A lot of the things you do with the snapshot command line tool is actually running a channel program for you, because it is just the most efficient way to do some things like delete a range of snapshots. Rather than having to make the octal a whole bunch of times, it uses a channel program to do it. So some of the operations that you do normally are actually implemented as channel programs kind of behind your back.
Can you name a replication tool that might be doing that?
I don't know of any replication tools that use channel programs.
Oh, so then what would be currently hooking in and using that?
It's like if you use ZFS destroy on a range of snapshots, it's just in the background that's implemented as a channel program because it was the easiest way to, ensure that one of the snapshots you were trying to delete didn't get deleted by someone else while you were, so things didn't disappear out from under you. But about your idea of zpool operations, like what zpool operation would you need to do in concert with other things?
Andrew, were you advocating for that? And that will definitely be a part of the libzfs API. Yes, and it's pretty early morning for Jan. Indeed.
It'd be late at night for Jan, wouldn't it? It'd be late for Jan already.
Yes, it would.
Not in the morning.
So I recall the original, the source of channel programs being Delphix, was it? And could you describe briefly the original motivation? Was it that the operations Alan described?
Instances where we would have lots of snapshots or even file systems that were going to be destroyed, and we wanted them to all go as one call to the kernel. So it was actually implemented in our Java stack to use the channel program to be able to handle that. So it could kind of create a big giant list of here's all the snapshots that we want to do, and then make one call to ZFS to kind of handle all that and make sure that it's all done in one transaction. That's what I recall. Does anybody recall anything different?
Yeah, I think the single transaction thing was one of the, like, all of them happen or not.
I think that was the motivating factor, right? Because it was like we wanted it to be atomic. Otherwise, like prior to channel programs, we had to like keep track of like, we had this ginormous list of snapshots that we're deleting. Some of them exist, some of them don't exist because maybe in the middle, like, the system crashed or the applications crashed. And so trying to keep that state consistent was kind of a pain in the butt. And so channel programs kind of allowed us to do a all or nothing kind of implementation.
Before channel programs, I think we had some prototype where we like did a ZFS snapshot -r of like the whole pool, and then went back and deleted the snapshots out of the file systems that we actually didn't need to have snapshots at that time, which is really slow because you have to do them one at a time. Yeah, so there are a lot of workarounds for that, like kind of one specific use case of needing to create a bunch of snapshots of a bunch of different file systems, but not like they weren't organized all under one control point.
Cool. Does anyone have usage examples to contribute, or shall we move on to another topic? It was one where most users haven't heard of it. They maybe use it internally, as Alan pointed out, and if there are opportunities there, let's communicate those. So I will say we just jump ahead to another topic.
I know there were some specific things Jan found missing, but I don't see that in any of our documentation right now.
Could you crawl the doc while we're doing this? The minutes?
I'm trying.
Cool, thank you.
But I'm not seeing it.
The one thing that I would add is, and people may do this already, but they may not realize that they can do this with channel programs, is like oftentimes if you have like a complex set of things, administrative commands that you're doing, you might have like a script that is doing these, kind of one at a time or looping through it. They may not realize that every one of those administrative commands is actually creating a bunch of transaction groups to kind of push the workload out. And so channel programs would be a way that you could make it very efficient. Do a lot of work with fewer transaction groups and fewer updates to the pool. It is kind of different to kind of wrap your head around it, but it does have a lot of power in that sense.
And another key use case that we have that kind of came out later for channel programs for us at Delphix was actually gathering information. So you can use channel programs to like list pools and snapshots and get properties. And there's a special mode that you can do where it'll do that without having to go into TX2 sync. But we use that to be able to like gather all the state of the pool at one point in time versus like if you use ZFS list or ZFS get, it's iterating over things. So if you have some other process that's like changing properties or adding and deleting things at the same time, then it's not like a consistent view as of one point in time. So with the channel program, it's like stopping all modifications, running your channel program to get whatever information you need across the whole, pool, and then returning that.
Yeah, to one of the points Dexter had on the slide earlier, the user properties, especially when people were using those to try to manage all the settings for a virtual machine on the ZVol that was hosting the image for it. They found that doing ZFS get and ZFS set on like 8 user properties for each VM was really expensive, especially since every set was required a transaction flush. But if you use a channel program, you can get all of those and set all of those as one administrative operation instead of 8. And it will take away most of the performance penalty that people saw when using, I forget the name of the tool, that was managing a large set of user properties on a data set per VM. And so channel programs are the solution to that problem, as Matt was describing, being able to kind of more flexibly get a list of data sets and a bunch of properties about them without having to do a whole long list of IOCLs every time.
So Jan has joined us, and it's not too late for him. And let's see if we've got audio, Patrick.
Yes.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Could you please describe your use cases and desires? Thank you, sir. There he is.
So the use case, which is already well served by ZFS channel programs, is to ignore the problem that ZFS differentiates between recursive snapshots and just snapshots under a common parent with the same name. So within a ZFS channel program, I can, within a transaction, loop over all the snapshots, find the ones with the expected snapshot name, and then treat them as if they're recursive, even if they're not recursive. So that's a good use case, in my opinion. But the one which is sadly not possible, according to what I found in the documentation, which would be a lot more useful to me, is to make thin jail creation so fast that it can be part of the jail startup by basically looping over all the ZFS datasets, find the clones, compare the origin, and only if the origin is not the version of the template I want to run, then I destroy them and recreate the clones. But you can't do that right now because there is no API to create a clone from inside a channel program, as far as I have found in the ZFF program's documentation of the Lua API.
Is that accurate?
So I would not have them require them to be mounted by them, because I would totally understand that mounting from inside a transaction is probably not possible. But creating them unmounted, but with the mounting can mount property set to something I can control, so that I can then later collect them all up and mount the missing mount points, would suit my use case, which is writing very long jail.confs.
It should be possible to add that functionality. I don't think there's any, I mean, aside from, as you mentioned, the mounting is not going to work, but like you can create snapshots. Can you create file systems from a channel program today?
I would think so.
I don't remember.
You can take snapshots, but I don't know about general purpose file systems. Let me check.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if there was a problem with creating file systems in general.
My guess is it's probably similar to the clone, where like you could do that.
You can't mount it, yeah.
You have to kind of do the Lua program or the channel program together, do all your creation, and then after the fact, go and process those file systems and then do the mounts outside.
So especially if the Lua code could return the list of created file systems as a Lua array of names, then I would know which file systems to mount. So that returns structured data, it would be really nice, because then I can just mount what is required to be mounted and wouldn't even have to rescan.
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable to me.
It's probably not a use case the original implementers at Delphix had, so it isn't done, but I don't see, as someone who's just bounced off the code, I didn't find a reason why it shouldn't work. I just would not feel comfortable trying to tinker with the innards of ZFS in that way.
Any questions for Jan while we have it?
Go
ahead.
Michael, you used the example of zpool commands. I don't think that most Z users will have a use case where they care about the performance of per operation overhead of zpool administrative commands, because those tend to run fairly seldom and your pools have a few hundred disks at most, whereas you can have a few hundred snapshots on a single file system easily if you do it a bit messy.
Yes, Andrew. Number one.
I could see it being useful possibly if you were importing a number of pools all at once, so that it maybe is only doing that initial scan for disks once.
Do HA operations perhaps have opportunities there? There were
I
some
don't know.
described 24 pools that all work in harmony, and you name it.
I don't know. It's just an arbitrary thought that popped into my head.
Okay, well, if it sounds like we have some action items for short-term or long-term, that's what I was hoping to achieve, and thank you, Jan, once again. So that said, shall we move on, or do we have more to discuss on channel programs? Okay. Yes, and many of us. So thank you so much for joining. Yes, sir.
To someone wanting to learn more about channel programs, I know that enumerating negatives is hard, but it would be nice to know basically which ZFS commands have equivalents in the API and which are known to have no equivalent in the API, so that you can basically look it up, find that, yes, my use case is not covered, I can stop looking.
Man page, is that not accurate? I mean, it might not be accurate anymore, but
The man page, I found it to be accurate, but it does only state what is supposed to work, not, yeah, you really give up, this use case is not covered. Like, for example, yes, you can set properties, but only user properties, and it's spelled out there very late in it, and no reason as to why it has to be that way. I looked at the code and it looks at, yeah, okay, non-user properties can have complicated consequences when you change them.
yeah.
So you can't do it from a channel program because it may not be possible to do within that single transaction, which may have already done other things.
So you're saying, like, as a user, you're looking for some functionality and you're not sure whether you have
Exactly.
like
I want to,
whether you just haven't found it in the man
exploring
page
the
because it's
design
using a
space.
different name or something. And it would be helpful if the man page had a list of like missing features and just laid out like, hey, here's all the things here's the things that we know that you can't do, and maybe a sentence about like nobody's done it yet, or like it's actually really hard, so that you would know that you had like found the definitive info versus, having to exhaustively read the whole man page to make sure that it doesn't somehow mention what you're looking for.
Yes, mostly basically not just, I wouldn't call them missing, but even the intentional absent ones.
Yeah.
Because missing implies, to me, depending on which connotation you burn the term down with, it's mostly, okay, this should be there, but sometimes it can't be there, or we decided it's not worth it, and you will have to accept that unless you want to implement it yourself. But it's just, and then some maybe more complex examples would be nice. I know there is one to loop over the second and third examples with better error handling than the first and so on. But maybe we should just start a page in the OpenZFS wiki of snippets which have been useful, so that you can more easily learn by example and reuse snippets, because it's not a place to put arbitrary complex code. Even if the API in theory allows you to, I don't know, compute a Mandelbrot fractal and return it as ASCII art if stupid.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.